The WWE draft picks for the first, second, and third and fourth rounds has been set. Bayley had a full pledge heel turn and is once again the SmackDown Women's Champion. What a night on SmackDown, guys. First of all, I'm glad the SmackDown comes back on Fridays. I actually wanted to do a video about SmackDown last week, but I've been hella busy with college, of course, and you know, but I've still been keeping track of SmackDown and Monday Night Raw. And let me just say, man, this was a heck of a SmackDown, especially the ending towards it. Not much really took place other than basic matches to determine draft picks from the starting of the show with Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. Where you kind of knew that Bray Wyatt was going to get involved in the match. Seth Rollins wins by DQ in a pretty decent match between the two. I was a little shocked that Seth, you know, he had boos, but it wasn't like he was booed out of the building type of boos like how Roman was. I heard fans cheering for Roman. It's a pretty decent match. I'm not even gonna go and talk about how awful the main event for Hell in a Cell was between him and Bray Wyatt, but I will say that the only thing that didn't really make sense to me was how they drafted Bray Wyatt to SmackDown, knowing that they're gonna want to keep Brock Lesnar on SmackDown, and Seth Rollins would have to stay on Raw. So if you want to be technical, even though they say the wild card is done and the wild card, doesn't exist anymore, it kind of still does, because if you're gonna do that, then you might as well just say that it's still in existence. I mean, there's no other way to slice it. But like I said, this was definitely a crazy night, especially the ending, and that's what I specifically want to talk about. I want to talk about the draft picks. I want to talk about the ending of the night when Bayley faced Charlotte, which was really the match that really caught my eye the most. I mean, the first match, it was obvious that Bray was going to get involved. He attacked Seth Rollins from under the ring, dragged Seth Rollins under the ring with him, put the man of claw on him, only for Seth Rollins to get out of the ring, only for him to appear on the top of the stage, the end of the end of the segment. Um, then from there, you had the OC. When it gets to New Day, basically had Kobe looking as if nothing really happened last week, to the loss that he took in over 5 to 6 seconds to Brock Lesnar, which is a pretty quick matchup. I do like what they did with those two women who had suffered from cancer. What they did for them. That was really good right there. Most of the matches were pretty fast. Actually, before that match even happened, there was apparently Shorty Gable now went against Baron Corbin in a pretty decent match. I wouldn't say it was as good as their King of the Rings final match or their match on Raw where Baron Corbin got disqualified, but it was still a pretty good match. Um, I was kind of expecting Baron Corbin, or should I say King Corbin, to win. That was a pretty decent match. I just find it ridiculous that Chad Gable's actually going by the actual name Shorty Gable now. I mean, how many times are people going to get these name changes? And then we had the OC and the New Day that, didn't really have that much that took place in the match, but it was decent for what it was. And, then you had the main event. So, typically most of these draft picks were expected. The only person who really got drafted, in my eyes, is Randy Orton, because Randy Orton has been on SmackDown. Even though they had this ridiculous wildcard rule, he was able to show up on Raw. He's been a SmackDown guy since the first draft, since they brought back the draft in 2016. He's been on SmackDown for a long time, and he really was the only person who was a legit draft pick. All the rest of them pretty much stayed in the same spot they were already at. Becky was already on Raw. She's a Raw Women's Champion. It wouldn't make any sense to put her on SmackDown, just like it wouldn't make any sense to put Charlotte on SmackDown, well, at the time, it wouldn't have made any sense to put her on SmackDown because she was SmackDown Women's Champion going into the show, so it wouldn't have made any sense to put her on Raw, excuse me. Um, So it was kind of obvious Becky was going to stay on Raw. It was obvious that they were going, to keep. It was obvious. All the picks were obvious. Roman Reigns staying on SmackDown, even though he mostly showed up on Raw as a SmackDown superstar. He barely even was featured on SmackDown the whole time he's supposedly been a SmackDown guy. Him staying on SmackDown didn't surprise me. The Viking Raiders staying on Raw didn't surprise me. Heavy Machinery staying on SmackDown didn't surprise me. As soon as I saw Alexa Bliss going to Raw, it was pretty obvious Nikki Cross was going to stay on Raw. I mean, most of these picks, OC stand on Raw. I mean, most of these picks that they did were just kind of like it was obvious. It wasn't. You could tell that the crowd. It was a jam packed crowd, but you could tell that they didn't really seem that interested in this as far as the picks were because it was just typically people staying on shows that they already were. Now you did have Lacey Evans get moved to SmackDown, which technically. That was a draft. That was a different pick for her even though she's appeared on SmackDown multiple times before she was initially a member on Raw. And even though she appeared on SmackDown, even when the wild card was going on, that technically, still was a new pick as well. Um, putting Lacey Evans on SmackDown was something different. Putting Randy Orton on Raw was something different. Initially, officially making the Street Profits members of Raw because even though they've been doing a bunch of backstage segments on Raw, now they can actually wrestle on Raw as a tag team and not only just stay backstage doing backstage segments. That's going to be really interesting, and they need that for the tag team divisions, especially with the way how it's been a lack of tag teams, use of tag teams. So to have them be official members of Raw now is a really good thing. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what they do as it retains to teams like the Usos that you haven't heard anything about ever since Jay got the second DUL. Um, so you haven't seen them on TV, you haven't seen them on either show, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with them. Um, if they're gonna stay on Raw, if they're gonna be moved to SmackDown, back to SmackDown because of the Revival being the SmackDown Tag Team title champions, and because of the fact that they were feuding with the Revival before that whole thing happened. I don't know what's gonna happen with them. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens to people that people who are injured, guys like Samoa Joe. Who apparently once again is going through an injury. Guys like Elias is going through an injury. Apparently, they're going to keep the draft going on the.com. The people who they just didn't draft at all, the free agents could just kind of pick where they want to go. Yeah, there's a lot of people who's going through injuries right now. Joe, Elias, Ember Moon apparently is dealing with an injury right now. Sasha Banks got drafted to SmackDown. The only thing that I didn't really get about that pick was, if you're going to put, and this is kind of going back to what they did with Bray. And I know they couldn't they weren't going to draft Seth because he wasn't eligible. Neither was Charlotte. Certain people weren't eligible to be drafted. But if you're going to draft Sasha to SmackDown, and this kind of relates to what they did in the main event by having Bayley win the title back, it kind of leads to question as to what Charlotte would do because the fact that her and Bayley are both heels now, and the fact that the fact that Bayley is once again a SmackDown Women's Champion, it kind of leads to the question of what does that really do for Sasha? Does that just leave her as like the henchman, like the person who, is just helping Bayley retain the title? I mean, because the type of personality, the type of persona that they have Sasha have, she's not that type of person that would just, want to help uh, Bayley, they're best friends, but Bayley was the one who was protecting Charlotte most of the time. Bayley was the one protecting Sasha most of the time. Charlotte was protecting Bayley, but I mean, that kind of leads to the question is what's going to happen with Sasha when she does come back? What is exactly are they going to do with her? It wouldn't make sense for them to turn her back babyface, but it kind of leads to questions where does this leave her? Because that's the only title that's on SmackDown Live, unless you're going to have her and Bayley also, you know, and you can't have them fight for the women's tag team titles because now you just turn Asuka and Kairi Sane heel, and that's heel versus heel. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. So it's kind of like, the only question with that I had with them moving Sasha to SmackDown is what does that really do with her? I get why they did it. Now you have both her and Bayley together on the same brand. But at the same time, it's like if you had kept her on Raw, well, at least you could have had her, win the Raw Women's Championship, which she should have won at Hell in a Cell. Then you could have had her dominating on Raw. Then you could have had Bayley dominating on SmackDown. I don't really get that, but hopefully, they do something with it. Vince has proven that he really doesn't have a lot of faith in Sasha, especially when every time she has been champion, she's dropped the belt in her first title defense. He's proven that he uh, you know, doesn't really like Sasha apparently, just by the way he's booked her, and also the simple fact of him having her lose at Hell in a Cell. All those are prime examples. But like I said, most of the draft picks, uh, it was expected. There were only two I would actually say that were legit picks, legit changes, or should I say three? Because the Street Profits, they were on Raw, but they weren't official members yet. They just kept appearing backstage, but now they can actually initially have matches, which is a good thing. And I really would love to see them, square off against teams like if the Usos come back, it'd be nice to see them go against each other or go against, someone like the Viking Raiders, who uh, I believe they were supposed to face in NXT. I forgot if they actually went against them or not. Um, and it's just a ton. It's just a ton of teams right now, and that's another thing too. It kind of makes you question like the teams that weren't named, like the New Day. Since the OC are staying on Raw, I hope the New Day stays on SmackDown. They weren't even announced where they were going, but I hope that they stay on SmackDown because I know Fox and USA are the ones who are coming up with this draft. I hope the New Day actually stays on SmackDown because I don't really see a reason putting them on Raw. Uh, I think at this point they really established themselves, particularly Kofi Kingston on SmackDown. It would be nice if they did something more with Big E and Xavier individually as their like two hell of a talents, especially Xavier Woods. He's the most I would say the most underrated of the team. Um, but and I don't know what it is that they're planning on doing with them, especially when they kind of just put Kobe back in his regular smiley type mood, as if his loss for the WWE Championship. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, it seems to me that he's directly going straight back to mid card level. Uh, but and I did want to do a video about that last week because I was highly disappointed when it happened. But yeah, it just I don't know. But so the draft picks was decent. Most of it, I expected it to happen. Didn't really surprise me. I wish that if it wasn't for this Wednesday Night War crap, you would actually be seeing some guys from NXT come up. But then again, based on the way they've treated having their NXT titles, it's kind of a good thing that did not happen this time. Um, Kevin O was going to Raw, a pretty good pick. After his feud with Shane, I mean, it really, what more could you really have him do on SmackDown? Now, the real question is, what is he going to do coming back to Raw now that you have him back on Raw? I mean, because it's obvious that because Shane is a McMahon, he can easily come back if he wants to, but it's probably Shane himself or Vince who, just straight up was like, he's going to just leave for a while or so because, he's paid his dues for the character. He's done a good job with it. Um, you know, some people liked him doing that best in the world gimmick, and then you had the kind of go away type of heat. But he did a good job with it. But now, that time is done with it. And I'm kind of glad because it was starting to get annoying. But he's a McMahon, so because he's a McMahon, he could come back if he really wants to. But I don't think he really does. at this moment. I don't think he wants to. So for Kevin Owens to beat him last week, get him fired, and to get drafted to Raw, I think that's good for Kevin because now he can set his sights on something new. Whether or not that's going to keep him babyface or not remains to be seen. But now he can keep something new, and since Sammy is still a heel, it would make logical sense to just go ahead if you're gonna have Sammy constantly because they initially fully drafted the revival to SmackDown, despite the fact that they were Raw superstars that won the SmackDown Tag Team titles, which didn't make any sense to me at Clash of Champions. Now you have now that you have this thing where you putting Kevin on Raw, it would make sense to put Sammy as an official member of SmackDown since he showed up on SmackDown half the time anyway. And now that he's, the spokesperson for Shinsuke, you might as well just put him on SmackDown as an official member with Shinsuke since he was already coming on SmackDown anyway with Shinsuke. Um, that's you might as well just do it. I mean, it just, you know, a lot of these picks were not really surprising. I didn't really see most of them as changes, but there were a few. Like I said, the Orton, the Street Profits. The Natalia was not a change because she was already a Raw. She was already on the Raw, so that wasn't really anything new. Uh, but she had a couple of new ones here and there, a couple of different ones. Uh, Lacey coming to SmackDown. So it was pretty decent. So it'd be interesting to see how they do the the draft pick on Raw, and then we get to the main event. Man, the thing, some people are probably grieving right now. Some people probably question, why. Why would Charlotte win the belt if she was gonna lose it a couple of days later? Come on, guys, this is WWE right here. This is typical WWE's logic. It's pretty obvious why. I mean, I know some people probably know, but then some people probably don't. I mean, it was pretty obvious. The only reason why they had Charlotte win the title at the only reason they had her win it at Hell in a Cell was so that they could fully change Bayley's character. She was already a heel, but they wanted to fully change her character and initially change her full gimmick because she was a heel, but she was still coming out as the same person with the same theme, with the same hugging stuff, with the same stuff popping up when she, comes out. Nothing really, the only thing that really changed was the tactics she was doing in her matches, but she was still the same. But when she came out tonight with a hood on, her hair was out, and she destroyed her little I can't even think of what those things are called. Those little joints that comes up. Uh, you knew that it was a change in her character, and I like it. And then at the end of the night, she said, "Bitches, screw all of you," and walked out. I mean, it kind of made her look like a crybaby when she lost the title, how she was throwing a tantrum at Hell in a Cell. But I mean, I get it. I get what they were doing. First, they were trying to make her seem like, I'm the role model. I'm doing this for you guys. I'm doing this for the kids. This is all for you guys. They were trying to make her seem like she feels like the victim when she first turned heel. But now that but then when she lost the title, that gave her a reason to snap. And so that's initially what they did. Once she lost the title, they gave her a reason to snap, and now she snapped, and she used it to cheat her way into winning the title back and smacked on SmackDown tonight. And I have no problem with it. I have absolutely no problem with it. Um, I think Charlotte is an incredible athlete. But I do think that Charlotte has gotten way too many title opportunities and has won a championship way too many times. A 10-time uh, women's champion in a matter of just 4 years. Wait, no, yeah, 4 years at this point. Pretty and won it pretty quickly at that. Don't get me wrong, though. I'm not hating on Charlotte, but seeing Bayley win the belt, I'm perfectly fine with it. She needed this. I don't really think it would have sued Charlotte will, especially considering that Charlotte was the heel going into their first match of Clash of Champions, and then all of a sudden they turned Bayley heel right before Clash of Champions, and so it just kind of like what would really have been the point of it being of Charlotte all of a sudden turning babyface when she still acts like a heel makes no sense. So it's kind of like you know it's confusing because during their match at Clash of Champion, even before that, Charlotte was still acting like herself, like a heel. During the match, though, Bayley retained as an heel, but then at Hell in a Cell, it was like they were both acting like heels. So it's like I don't really get why they would do that. But then again, this kind of goes back to when Daniel Bryan turned heel right before Survivor Series last year, and then he went against Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series, and then it was a heel versus heel type match. And when you seen the type of things Daniel Bryan was doing, you would kind of understand why they turned him heel right before Survivor Series and why it was able to work during his match with Brock Lesnar. So I guess even though this isn't really a good comparison, I guess it makes sense to why they did it. Um, so, like I said, I completely understand why she won the title. I'm perfectly fine with it. You know, not and to see that she has not only uh, changed her hairstyle. I mean, has put her hair out, but she's also changed her theme. She's got rid of that stuff that she comes out with. That is a full heel right there. And I'm perfectly fine with it. I mean, Sasha was the first one to do it. Her best friend did it first. They had her do it first, when she changed her, dyed her hair blue, came out as a whole new person. The only thing she didn't change was her theme, but Bayley did. But I don't really think Sasha. I don't think every heel needs to change their theme, but I think for Bayley, she needed it the most because her theme just didn't match her being a heel. And so, like I said, they wanted to progress it, and that is one thing out of all the things WWE has been doing this year that's just been awful, especially Hell in a Cell, hand. Uh, this was brilliant. I like how they came. I like how they did this. It was gradual build up. I mean, in my opinion, I think Bailey, with the way she just snapped at Hell in a Cell, and then came out today as a completely different person. I think that really worked. You could just see that that change in character, that change in direction it was going to happen, but they just needed to give it a reason to happen. And it was going to take for her to lose the belt, for Charlotte to win it 10 times, for that to happen. And that's exactly what took place. So that's all I want to say for this video. Like I said, uh, Helen's SmackDown tonight was a pretty decent show. Match wise, the main event is mostly what I'm going to take out of the SmackDown. I did think the opening match between Seth and Roman was pretty good up until Bray got involved, and you already knew that was going to happen anyway. I thought I'm still going to call him Chad Gable, Shorty Gable. I just think is really corny, but whatever. I thought this match with Baron Corbin was good. I wouldn't say it was as good as their first couple of matches, but it was still a hell of a match. You knew that King Corbin was going to get the victory. Uh, the New Day and the OC was a decent match. And then the main event, pretty good match while it lasted. And, then Bayley cheated her way to win the title. But hey, it's perfectly fine with me. I like this. And the only thing I question is, where does this leave Sasha Banks now that they're both SmackDown exclusive? I mean, obviously they're not going to chase Asuka and Kairi Sane after the women's tag team titles because they're also heels now. And, they didn't get drafted at all, so it's going to be interesting to see where they get drafted. And that's another thing, too. I mean, that to me is questionable. It's also questionable why you put Bray on SmackDown if he's going to continue feuding with Seth. I mean, obviously, the indication is that he's going to lose at Survivor Series. So it's like, why still having feud with Seth if that's the case? Seth has to stay on Raw. If he goes on SmackDown, then you have two champions on SmackDown and no champion on Raw. Doesn't make any sense. So, with that being said, that's the questions I have about the draft. It doesn't really add up. Uh, and then there's some people like Liv Morgan and Eric Young and all these people who we don't even really see. Buddy Murphy, who we were seeing for a while, Aleister Black. You know, there are some people. Ricochet was drafted to Raw, but he was already a Raw guy, so that wasn't really anything new. But there are some people, Cesaro, some people names that were not mentioned at all, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with them. Guys like Andrade, Cesaro. I feel like Andrade will probably stay on SmackDown because they're trying to keep up the Hispanic viewership. But you got guys like him, guys like Buddy Murphy, as I already mentioned. I don't think Lou Harper is going to go anywhere at this point because of what he's been doing on Twitter. But there's so many guys who were not mentioned. And I know that this was only the first night of the draft, but it kind of leads to question as to what are they going to do with these guys. And Eric Young, I didn't even know he still wrestled. First of all, the guy has not done anything. I thought he was a backstage producer, but he was on the list to be drafted. I just don't know. AOP, I would assume they're going to stay on Raw, um, which is a little questionable because you do need some more teams on SmackDown. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. You got guys like Lars Sullivan, who's been injured for a while now. Don't know what they're going to do with him. Oh yeah, the Lucha House Party, they got moved to SmackDown. That was kind of new for them because they were mostly on Raw, so that's different. Uh, you got that trio on SmackDown. I forgot to mention about them. That's pretty different. But like I said, a lot of names weren't mentioned. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with those people that were not mentioned at all. Hopefully, I get to see them on TV again. We saw Aleister Black on Raw this past Monday when he beat the Singh brothers, but he was not named. He was not mentioned at all as part of the draft. So maybe he'll be mentioned on Raw. So like I said, be interesting to see what they do to people who injured and the people who just weren't mentioned at all. Got even like guys like Mustafa Ali or Ali. But yeah, and even I was told that even some 205 Live guys are going to be drafted as well, um, which is interesting because that kind of really sums up the initial rumor that 205 Live is coming to an end, and I think it's perfectly fine. I mean, Leo Rush won the 205 Live. He won the cruiserweight title on NXT and got a huge reaction against Drew Gulak. Now imagine if that had been on 205 Live, it wouldn't have been as big. The match wouldn't have gotten that much reaction to it. So it's perfectly fine with me. Um, there's a lot of names that weren't mentioned, so be interesting to see what we do with them. That's it for me. Sign over at Master Flex. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys in the everyday. Peace.